Hi, I'm Brentan Schellenbach, and in today's video I'm going to talk about sun salutations for beginners. So if you've done 0 sun salutations to maybe 50, this is going to be relevant information for you. So to begin, a sun salutation is a series of postures that's linked up with your breath. So each posture goes for the count of 1 breath, either an inhale or an exhale. And most of the postures are already designed to be on one type of breath. So for instance, you would only do a halfway lift on an inhale, and you would only do a forward fold on an exhale. However, there is still a lot of room to play. So when you go to different classes with different teachers, you're going to find that some people interpret them differently. Some people add in postures, take them out. There's all different types of sun salutations. There's A, B's, and C's from different lineages. It just goes on and on and on. So these are some of the things that I just think are kind of the basic things to keep in mind when you're going through your sun salutations, so you can find movement that's really suited exactly for you. Now, I think the best place to start with this is with the concept of the breath. And to talk just a little bit about this, we need to know what yoga is. Yoga is about 5,000 years old. It's a system of self-inquiry or self-study, and it is aimed at helping us realize the truth about who we are, and that happiness can be a part of our lives in every moment and not just in some moments. And it gives us the tools of recognizing when we're participating in creating unhappiness for ourselves. One of the tools of that is this practice on the yoga mat with all of the yoga postures. But this practice is actually only about 100 years old. So if you go back to yoga as 5,000 years old versus yoga as 100 years old, we're practicing with a very infantile version of the art of yoga. So when we practice this, the good part of it is that when you practice this, you have access to all of that 5,000 years of study of philosophy and of application of yoga, which, some people meditate and they call it yoga. Some people give to homeless people and they call that yoga. Some people sing and dance and write and they call that yoga. So we can call yoga many, many different things. The version that we practice here on our yoga mats, in order to really access that whole system of yoga, which translates from Sanskrit to mean to yoke or to unite, is the breath. We need to have something to be united to. We can't be united to the postures because they're changing all of the time every 5 seconds. So we need to be united with something that is a little bit more reliable, a little bit more intimate, and a little bit more stable and close to who we really are. So when we're talking about the breath in yoga, throw all that out. Okay, now we're here. Talking about the breath in yoga, we use a certain type of breath. There's all different types of breath. It's 5,000 years old, so there's so much stuff. But the type of breath that we use in our sun salutations is called ujjayi. Translates to mean victorious sounding breath. And the ujjayi actually does have a little sound. It's created by a partial constriction in the back of your throat. And it's hard to describe really more than that because it's such an internal experience. So some teachers say sound like the ocean. Some teachers say sound like Darth Vader. My particular favorite way of thinking about it is that I'm using my throat to pull the air in through my nostrils, and using my throat to control the amount of air that I'm letting out through my nostrils on the exhale. And so the benefit of breathing like this, I'll do it for you in a second, but the benefit of breathing like this is that it warms up the air as it comes into your system. And warmth is the first prerequisite to stretching any muscle in the body. So right there, we're building that bridge from this internal practice of yoga to the physical pieces of the body. So it heats up the air as it enters into the system. And then when you constrict, it also will let you draw the breath out. So you become really the master of the breath, and you start to really choose the breath as it happens, and start to choose your movements as it's happening. And the idea is that with more practice, you become more skilled at this, and you're able to choose movements that lead you towards these everlasting wells of happiness that we have access to in all moments of our lives, but maybe just don't feel like we have access to. So the breath sounds a little bit like this. So you can hear it's very thick, it's very slow, and it's very even from start to finish. So there's no big swells, there's no clamping of it, there's no stopping it, perforating it. And you'll also notice that the length of it means that it has to go super low in the body. And so we're taking in a lot of breath and we're putting a lot of breath out. So we're cycling through our nutrients. We're making sure that new oxygen is coming into our systems and that we are fully releasing the air that we're finished with and completed with. So this is the breath that we're going to want to practice and build. And just like any yoga posture, there's a learning curve there. So you can't expect perfection of yourself now or at all through any moment of your life, but especially in the yoga practice. And you'll also start to practice the body postures along with it. And so when you have the breath practice on the one side and the body practice on the other, and you're trying to match both things and you're trying to pay attention equally to both things, you start to see yourself in a very interesting way. You start to see yourself and your patterns of reacting to things and how you develop expectations of yourself and what happens when you meet those expectations versus when you don't meet them. So it's a very, very interesting practice. And now I can show you just a basic sun salutation flow, let's say, that you might find. And teachers, again, will add in poses and take them away, but I just want to give you the basic shapes and how you can modify them for your own body so they start to make sense to you, because I know a lot of times in class, we have one breath in each posture and that's it. There's no time to really explore if this is the right posture for you. So when you're ready, we will get started in downward facing dog. So you can start downward facing dog from a tabletop position. Some people recommend to have your downward facing dog even be set with your hands slightly forward. So that's really preferential, I think. Now you want to try to set your arm bones here. And if you're unfamiliar with the fact that your bones can rotate, they can do all kinds of crazy things. A lot of this might sound new to you. So don't let yourself get overwhelmed or frustrated by what doesn't make sense right now, because it will start to make sense very shortly, especially if you keep practicing. So here's a little training exercise for our elbows and shoulders. You can just bend the elbows out to the side, and then we want the downward facing dog elbows to be more wrapped back here. Now, not everybody's shoulder girdle can make this shape. That's sometimes in the bones, sometimes in the muscle. So you just have to find where your body stops at that wrap-in point, and then the arms can go to straight. And then you would tuck the toes, lift the knees, press up and back. And already you would want to be going into that ujjayi breath here. So not everybody, by the way, would have straight legs. Some people will have bent legs, some people have lifted heels, legs open. You really want to try to do your best to get your pelvis as high up to the sky as you can. And so especially if you're one of these downward facing dog friends, you probably got some hamstring shortness or some other shortness that's preventing you from going up here. So bending the knees, taking the feet wider will give you a better shot at getting there. And so it's traditionally kind of cued here that the inhale you use to prepare to come forward. So some people look forward and then eventually you start hopping forward. So that's what that inhale is for. And then you would use your exhale to step or just take your time walking all the way forward to your mat. and you would hang over your lower body in a forward fold. So quick rule about forward fold is that the legs should always be facing forward by the second toe or in, but not really open. Because as they're going in, they are able to open the space of the inner groin and thigh behind you. That's the opposite action there. And then you might also bend the knee here. So the best thing you can do for yourself in a forward fold is try to close the gap between your belly and your thighs. And this is called hip flexion. And keeping that hip flexion, that's when over time and years, you would start to play the edge of your pose back towards straight legs. So lifting the backs of the legs up to the sky, lifting the backs of the knees up away from the calves. And we want to be really certain that the weight is fully centered between the front and back of the foot, because if we go too far back into the heel, then we start to puff through the hamstring at the back of the knee, and that doesn't feel so good. So we want to make sure that the weight is forward into the balls of the feet so that the calf hooks appropriately, because the calf wants to be pushing your shin bones forward. And then from here, there's an inhale portion that will take you up to what we call halfway lift. So you inhale, hands back to the legs, and then you'll stretch forward. And the idea is you just want to get your spine straight. So some people find that straight spine like all the way up here. So again, it's really not up to you. Really, none of this is up to us. You just find what works. And so some people will bend their legs. Some people will have really straight legs, some people will be down here. But you want to feel the shoulders drawn to the back. So notice the difference between the shoulders sagging to the floor and then the shoulder blades integrating on the back, the torso lengthening out, the abdominals hug into the spine, and then you get super long from tailbone to skull. And that's always taken on the inhale breath. And then exhale, forward fold. And poses repeat, so we can inhale, halfway lift. And so that pose is always on the inhale, and then on the exhale, we'll just press our pose up to Tadasana. So we'll come all the way to a standing position. This standing position is very much preferential for you based on like where you like your feet in space. And I like mine just right underneath my sitting bones. You'll press down. Again, even out the weight between all portions of the feet. And if you need to feel it, then lift your toes, because when the toes lift, it'll push down with the remaining bone structure, so you can feel that. And then you gently want to feel a decompression through your skeleton. So use all of the muscles, push into your ground, and then squeeze up through the center line of your body as if you were trying to lift your skeleton away from the floor, each bone away from its neighbor. The only bones that aren't doing that are the shoulder bones. So the shoulder bones draw down even as the ribs start to lift this way. So you start as you're breathing your ujjayi and you're feeling all of the different pieces of the body posture puzzle. You can start to feel the direction of your muscle energy, because there's direction to it. Then typically from here, there's an inhale. You lift the arms all the way up to the sky. And on the exhale, you can take the hands together, thumbs draw right in front of the chest. Inhale. The arms can sweep up again. Now, this is also the most intense position on our shoulder joints here. So if your shoulders are tight or you're working from an injury, you might find your pose more comfortable with the arms wider, lower in front of you, elbows down. So really make your arm variations your own. And then from here, an exhale to a fold. Ground your feet, inhale, halfway lift, hands back to the thighs, super strong belly, stretch forward. And then on our exhale, we'll go to a high plank, top of a push-up. So that's feet back. You want to get the hips as high as the shoulders here, shoulders over wrists. And then press back through your heels. Now, if you're not doing another form of exercise, you might find this very challenging to hold, so you can always lower down to the knees here. And wherever you're working, I'll do it maybe half and half here. Wherever you're working, I'll do it up here for now. You want to bend your elbows a little bit and move them back to the back plane of the mat. Now I'll do chaturanga with my knees down. So why don't you go ahead, lower your knees. That way you can feel the pose in the upper body. So it's like you cut it in half, and then you can feel it better later. So you want to look forward. When you look forward with your chin, that will direct your heart forward. Catch your pose with your belly, push down with your fingers, take a nice big inhale. And then exhale, lower the elbows. At the elbows, move the heart forward, chin forward, heart forward, chin forward. Hold it, and then release. So this one's a very complicated pose. Chaturanga, I think probably took me over a year to feel like I had some understanding, even a little bit of understanding of the pose. So that's a big one. You just work with it over time. So once you work your shoulders and you get your core strong, you go down through the yoga push-up, then you usually go out to a back bend shape. And so also for a beginner, the back bends can feel quite cumbersome, especially if you're working from a spinal injury or something like that, or just you have a really tight spine for some reason. So you can really modify this to be whatever you want it to be. Just a back bend would be you lifting yourself away from the floor, just using your back muscles, so do that. But if you want to go up to the straight arm back bend, you would slide your hands back underneath your elbows. And it's hard to remember our legs, but we have to because they're the base of the back bend. So stretch your toenails open, push your 4th and 5th toes down into the floor. Some people have a hard time pointing their feet like this, by the way. So if that's you, roll up something and put it under your ankles and do the same thing. And then as you start to lift, we don't want to feel this in the low back vertebra. And your back bend practice will come with time, so don't demand too much out of yourself today or any day. You're going to see where it feels good. You want to keep your chest forward, your elbows in, as you start to curl up. Now, notice here that I'm not dumping into my shoulders and shrugging up into a back bend. And also notice that my arms and my shoulders are not rolling forward. Sometimes when your hands are placed too far forward, this is what happens. The arms roll forward. You press out with your elbows out to the side. It's also not the best experience to be having. So elbows back, hands underneath them. Stretch your legs open, curl 4th and 5th ones. You want to ground into your fingers as you curl up. Chest remains forward. If I were to bend my elbows here, they would bend straight back, and I would go down to the floor. And then from here, you pull your pelvis back. Here's tabletop position again. This is where you can feel the effects of all of that craziness that just happened. Tuck the toes, lift the knees, and press back to downward facing dog. And so downward facing dog then is just a pose that we use to keep the cycle going throughout the yoga class. So you come back to it again and again. The poses add on or they take away. And if you're now looking to practice a few rounds of sun salutations, they're the perfect full body warm-up. And the repetition of them really allows us to feel our breath, to be guided by our breath, and it just allows us to be quiet with ourselves for about 15 minutes. So that's always a good thing to do. So if you want to practice some sun salutations, we have another video called Warming Sun Salutations. We'll link you up. And other than that, comment if you have questions. We'd love to hear from you, and namaste.